I still remember the sound. Not the shouting, not the laughter. The sound that stayed with me was the way the chain rattled when they dragged him across the ground. It was early evening, the kind where the sky looks bruised instead of dark, and the cold crept into your bones without asking permission. I had wrapped my coat tight around myself, counting the coins in my pocket for the 5th time as I walked through the outer yards of the scrap exchange. 4 copper coins. That was all I had left after paying rent. 4 coins to last until the end of the week. I wasn't supposed to be there. People like me didn't wander near the exchange cages. Omegas without a pack learned early where not to go. The wrong look could cost you teeth. The wrong word could cost you worse. So I kept my head down, my eyes fixed on the wet concrete, moving fast, hoping no one noticed me. Then I heard it. A sound so weak it barely counted as noise. Not a growl, not a howl. A broken whimper, dragged out of a throat that had forgotten how to ask for mercy. My feet stopped moving before my mind caught up. I looked toward the far end of the yard, where rusted fences leaned inward and men gathered in a loose circle. They were laughing, not the happy kind, the sharp, cruel kind that carried easily through the cold air. I should have walked away. Instead, something tight and painful bloomed in my chest, like a hand squeezing my heart. I moved closer. They had him tied to a steel post with a length of chain so short he couldn't stand properly. His body was slumped in the mud, shaking so badly the chain clinked against the metal pole with every breath. He was big, bigger than any stray animal I'd ever seen. But he was so thin it looked wrong, like his skin didn't belong to him anymore. And over his head, I felt sick when I saw it. A sack, thick burlap, darkened with old stains, pulled down tight and tied at the neck with rough rope. Whoever had done it hadn't bothered to make holes for air. The fabric clung to the shape of his muzzle every time he breathed, sucking inward like it wanted to suffocate him slowly. 5 coins, one of the men said loudly, nudging the creature's side with his boot. That's all he's worth, scrap meat. The creature flinched but didn't fight. That was what broke me. Not the injuries, not the humiliation, the fact that he didn't even try. My hands curled into fists inside my sleeves. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears, loud and uneven. I told myself to leave. I told myself I couldn't afford to care. Then one of the men yanked the chain, hard. The creature made that sound again, and I stepped forward. "I'll take him." The words came out smaller than I wanted, but the yard went quiet. They turned to look at me, real looks, sharp ones. Laughter followed. "You," the seller sneered, eyes sweeping over my patched coat and worn shoes. "You can barely feed yourself, Omega." I swallowed and held out my coins. 4 copper pieces, my whole future sitting in my palm. "He's 5, the man said. My chest tightened. I reached deeper into my coat and pulled out the last coin I'd sworn not to use, the emergency coin, the hope coin. 5. He took them without another word and unlocked the chain. "Don't come crying when it dies," he said. The weight of the creature nearly knocked me over as he collapsed against me. His body was burning hot beneath the grime, shaking with exhaustion. "I've got you," I whispered, even though I wasn't sure that was true. Dragging him home felt like dragging fate itself. When the door finally shut behind us, I cut the sack from his head. His eyes opened. Gold. Not gentle, not soft. Ancient, controlled, dangerous. That was the moment I understood. I hadn't bought a pup. I had bought something the world had tried very hard to break.
I didn't sleep that night. Every sound made me jump. Every shift of his weight sent my heart racing. I stayed curled in the corner of my basement room, knees pulled to my chest, watching him like he might disappear if I looked away for too long. He lay on the floor where I'd dragged him, chest rising and falling in uneven rhythms. His breathing rattled sometimes, sharp and wet, like something deep inside him was struggling to keep working. I didn't know how to help. I didn't even know what he truly was. All I knew was that leaving him like that felt wrong. Slowly, carefully, I moved closer. His eyes flicked open instantly. Gold met mine again, sharp and alert despite his injuries. His body tensed, muscles tightening beneath the filth and scars. A low sound rolled through his chest, warning but weak. "It's okay," I whispered, holding my hands up so he could see them. "I'm not going to hurt you." The words felt small, useless. Still, he didn't attack. That alone felt like a miracle. I fetched a bowl of water and knelt beside him, dipping a cloth into it. The smell of rust and blood filled the room as I gently cleaned the grime from his arms, his shoulders, his side. He flinched when I touched a deep cut along his ribs, a sharp hiss escaping him. "I know," I murmured. "I know it hurts." Something shifted in his gaze then. Not trust, not yet, but attention. As the hours passed, I learned his silences, the way he stiffened when I moved too fast, the way his breath eased when I spoke softly. He understood more than he let on. Near dawn, exhaustion finally pulled him under. I sat there, watching him sleep, noticing details I'd missed before, the way his hands weren't paws at all, but hands scarred and calloused, the way his face, beneath the dirt and bruises, was unmistakably not animal. My stomach twisted. By morning, I knew one thing for certain. Keeping him hidden would be impossible, and letting him go would be a death sentence. When he woke again, the sun was just beginning to rise, pale light spilling through the small window near the ceiling. He pushed himself upright with effort, teeth clenched against the pane. For a terrifying moment, I thought he might run. Instead, he looked at me. "You didn't leave," he said. His voice was rough, deep, unused. I stared at him, shock stealing my breath. You can talk," I whispered. His golden eyes searched my face carefully. "So can you." Something heavy settled in my chest then. Not fear, responsibility. "I'm called Leora," I said. "This is my home. It's not much, but it's safe." He studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded once, slow, deliberate. "Caelrin. That is the name they tried to bury." And in that moment, I knew the truth I hadn't wanted to face. Whatever Caelrin was, the world would come looking for him. I thought I understood fear. I was wrong. Fear wasn't the shouting men at the exchange. It wasn't hunger gnawing at my stomach or the nights I slept with one eye open. Fear was waking up one morning and realizing the world had started to notice what I was hiding. The first sign was the silence. Caelrin healed faster than he should have. I noticed it on the third morning after I brought him home. The deep gash along his ribs, the one that made him hiss when I cleaned it, had already begun to close. Not scabbed, not swollen, closed. Smooth skin stretching where torn flesh should still have been screaming. I didn't say anything. I pretended not to see it, because saying it out loud would make it real. He stayed mostly quiet, sitting against the far wall, watching everything. Watching me, watching the door, watching the tiny window near the ceiling as if he expected it to betray us at any moment. I talked anyway. I talked because silence felt dangerous. I told him about the bakery down the street that threw away bread at closing time. I told him about my mother, how she used to hum while she worked, how the house felt too quiet after she was gone. I told him about the way people looked through me, like I was a shadow instead of a person. He listened, always listening. Sometimes his gaze softened when I spoke.
Sometimes it sharpened, like my words were carving memories he didn't want to touch. By the 5th day, he could stand without help. By the 6th, he was pacing. "You need to rest," I told him, trying to keep the worry out of my voice. "I've rested enough for a lifetime," he replied. There was bitterness in that tone. Old, heavy. That was the day the knock came. It was light, casual, the kind of knock someone used when they assumed they were welcome. My blood went cold. Kelleran froze mid-step, his entire body going rigid. His head snapped toward the door, eyes blazing brighter than I'd ever seen them. Not gold now, something deeper, sharper, hunt-ready. I shook my head at him, barely breathing. "Please, don't." The knock came again. "Leora?" a man's voice called. "Building inspection, just routine." Routine. I swallowed hard and forced my legs to move. Every step toward the door felt like stepping closer to a cliff. I opened it just enough to peer out, forcing a polite smile onto my face. "Yes?" The man stood there in a gray coat, clipboard tucked under his arm. His eyes flicked past me, trying to see inside. "Just checking occupancy," he said. "Some reports of unusual activity." My heart slammed against my ribs. "Unusual?" I asked, playing dumb. "Noise, movement at odd hours." I laughed softly, hoping it didn't sound as forced as it felt. "I work nights sometimes. I drop things." His gaze lingered on my face, searching, measuring. Behind me, I felt Kelleran shift. The man's eyes snapped up. "You're not alone." The words landed like a hammer. "My cousin," I said quickly, too quickly. "He's unwell." The man hesitated. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Right. Well, keep things quiet." He turned to leave. I closed the door and slid the bolt shut, leaning against it as my legs gave out. Kelleran was already at my side. "They will come back," he said. Her certainty terrified me. "You don't know that," I whispered. "I do, because they always do." That night, he finally told me part of the truth. Not all of it, just enough to make my hands tremble. "I wasn't meant for the exchange," he said, staring at the floor. "I was meant for control." I waited. I was raised in a compound beyond the Eastern Ridge. They took pups like me, bigger ones, stronger ones. They trained us to obey, to fight, to protect their interests. My chest tightened. "Who?" He smiled without humor. "People with power, people who never get their hands dirty." The image of the sack over his head flashed in my mind. The chain, the way he hadn't fought. They punished resistance. They rewarded silence. I reached out without thinking and rested my hand near his, not touching, just close enough to feel the warmth. "You survived," I said. His eyes lifted to mine. "No," he said quietly. "I escaped." The difference mattered. That night, I dreamed of chains snapping. I woke to shouting, not inside the room. Outside. Voices echoed down the stairwell, sharp and urgent, boots pounding concrete, orders being barked. Kelleran was on his feet in an instant. "They found me," he said. Panic flooded me. "We have to hide you." "There is no hiding," he replied. I grabbed his arm. "You can't go back." He looked down at my hand, then at my face. Something unreadable passed through his eyes. "I won't," he said. The door rattled. "Open up!" someone shouted. I stood between Kelleran and the door without thinking. My body shook, but I didn't move. "You'll have to go through me," I said. For a long moment, he stared at me. Then, slowly, he stepped back. The door burst open. 3 men stormed in. Not inspectors, not officials. Their clothes were plain, but their eyes were hard. "Where is he?" one of them demanded. I lifted my chin. "No one's here but me." A lie. A terrible one. The air shifted. I felt it before I saw it. Caelrin moved. Not toward them. Past them. The room exploded into chaos. In seconds, the men were disarmed, pinned, breathless. Caelrin stood among them like something out of a legend, barely breathing hard. I stared, heart pounding. He looked back at me, fear flickering across his face. "I didn't want you to see that." But it was too late. I had seen everything. And I knew then that 5 coins bought me more than danger. They had bought me a future that would never be quiet again.
After they were gone, the room felt too small. Not because of the broken door or the overturned table or the deep cracks now running through the concrete floor. It felt small because the truth had finally stood up and stretched its full height between us. Caelrin didn't chase them. That was what unsettled me the most. He could have. I knew it, the way you know when a storm is holding back rain on purpose. But instead, he stood there, chest rising slowly, eyes dimming back from that terrifying brightness to their usual molten gold. I was shaking, not just my hands, all of me, the kind of shaking that comes when your body realizes it survived something it shouldn't have. "They won't stop," I said quietly. Caelmin nodded. "No." He moved to the door and looked down the stairwell, listening. Only when he was sure the men were gone did he turn back to me. "You should leave me," he said. The words hit harder than the shouting had. "What?" I whispered. "Tonight," he continued. "Pack what you can, go somewhere far. Say you never saw me." I laughed, sharp and breathless. "You think I can just erase this?" "This ends badly for anyone near me," he said. His voice wasn't dramatic. It was tired. It always does. Anger flared through my fear, sudden and hot. "You don't get to decide that for me." His gaze snapped to mine. "I chose you," I went on, my voice shaking now for a different reason. "I saw you chained, suffocating, treated like nothing, and I chose to stop. You don't get to undo that because it's inconvenient." Silence stretched between us. Then something cracked. Not in the room, in him. "You don't understand," he said, his voice low. "They didn't come for me because I'm dangerous. They came because I'm valuable." The word made my stomach drop. They built me. My strength, my instincts, my obedience. I was designed to belong to them. I stepped closer without realizing it. "You don't belong to anyone." A bitter smile tugged at his mouth. "That's what they want you to believe." We spent the rest of the night cleaning in silence. I patched the door as best I could. Caelrin repaired the deeper damage with unsettling ease, his hands steady, precise, like he'd done this 100 times before. By morning, my basement looked almost normal again. Almost. We didn't talk about what came next, but it followed us anyway. The city felt different after that. Louder, sharper, like it was watching me back for the first time. I noticed shadows lingering too long, footsteps that slowed when I slowed, eyes that slid away too quickly when I looked up. Caelrin noticed everything. "You can't keep going to the bakery," he said one evening. I frowned. "We need food." "They're tracking patterns, not you, me." That word again, me. The way he said it sounded like a burden. We adjusted. I went out less, he moved only at night. We spoke in whispers even when no one else was around. And slowly, without meaning to, we built something that felt like a pack. Not the loud, possessive kind people whispered about, a quiet one. Shared meals, shared watchfulness, shared silence that didn't feel empty. He never touched me unless I asked. He never raised his voice.
but the way he stood between me and the world said more than words ever could. 3 weeks passed. Then the letter arrived. It was slid under my door while I slept. Thick paper, no stamp, no name, just a symbol pressed into the wax seal. Caelrin froze when he saw it. "I know this mark," he said. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a single sentence: "Return the asset, or we reclaim it." My vision blurred. "They know where you are," I whispered. "Yes, and now they're done asking." That night, he finally told me the rest, about the facility, about the others like him who didn't survive, about the handlers who smiled while breaking bones, about the final test he was never meant to live through. They wanted to see if fear would make me loyal. It didn't. I reached for his hand. This time, he didn't pull away. "What do we do?" I asked. He looked at me, really looked at me, like he was memorizing my face. "We stop running," he said. A chill ran through me. From who? From the people who think power belongs only to them. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, and for the first time since I'd bought a chained creature for 5 coins, I realized something terrifying. The world wasn't hunting Caelrin anymore. It was preparing for war. The first thing I lost was sleep. Not all at once, not dramatically. Sleep slipped away in pieces, stolen by every creak of the building, every distant siren, every whisper of wind that sounded too much like footsteps. I would lie there staring at the ceiling, counting cracks, counting breaths, counting how many ways our door could be broken again. Caelrin noticed before I admitted it. "You're listening too hard," he said one night as I sat upright on my mattress, knees pulled close, pretending I wasn't afraid. "If I stop listening," I replied, "they'll catch us." His eyes softened in a way that made my chest ache. "They won't. Not yet." That should have comforted me. It didn't, because "not yet" meant soon. We changed everything after the letter. Our routines vanished. Meals were irregular. Lights stayed low. I started wearing different coats when I went out, tying my hair differently, taking longer routes even when my legs ached. Caelrin watched from the shadows when I left, and was always there when I returned, like a silent promise that I wouldn't come home alone. But safety felt thin, fragile, like glass stretched too far. One evening, as rain hammered against the small window, Caelrin finally said the words I'd been avoiding. "They won't stop until they have proof," he said. "Proof of what?" I asked, though I already knew. "That I'm alive." The truth landed heavily between us. "They think you're dead?" I whispered. He nodded once. "They reported me as a failed subject, destroyed in containment." My stomach twisted. "Then why—" He interrupted. "Because someone doubted it. Someone noticed patterns, missing men, broken teams, fear where there shouldn't be any. Fear, because of him. And now?" I asked. "Now they need confirmation." Silence pressed down on us. I hated the next thought the moment it entered my mind, but it refused to leave. "If they see you," I said slowly, "really see you, would they stop looking?" Caelrin's gaze snapped to mine. "No." The certainty in his voice sent a chill through me. He continued, "They would come harder, with authority, with justification." I swallowed. "Then what do we do?" For the first time since I met him, Caelrin hesitated. "I don't know," he said. That scared me more than anything else. Days passed, then weeks, and then something strange happened. Caelrin began to change. Not in the way people fear, not monstrous, not violent. It was subtler than that, quieter, like watching a storm gather without thunder. He grew stronger, not just physically, though the injuries that once slowed him vanished completely.
It was in his presence, the way the room seemed to adjust around him, the way the air felt heavier when he was focused. And others noticed. The woman upstairs started greeting me by name. The baker stopped charging me full price. A group of men on the corner stepped aside without realizing why. "Does that happen because of you?" I asked him one night. "Yes," he said. "No pride, no denial." "What is it?" I whispered. "What are you becoming?" He looked down at his hands, flexing them slowly. "What they tried to make me," he said, "and what they failed to control." The next threat didn't come as a letter. It came as a choice. I was walking home when a black vehicle rolled to a stop beside me, silent as a shadow. The window lowered just enough for a man's eyes to meet mine. "Leora, we need to talk." My heart stopped. "I don't know you," I replied, forcing my voice steady. He smiled. "You know exactly who I represent." I ran. I didn't think, I didn't hesitate. I ran like fear had grown legs inside my chest and was dragging me forward. The sound of footsteps followed, not chasing, letting me know they could. I burst through the basement door, gasping. Kaelrin was on his feet instantly. "They found you," he said. "They spoke my name," I whispered. Something dark flickered behind his eyes. "That means they're done being careful," he said. "What do they want?" I asked, though I was already shaking. "They want me to choose," I replied. "Choose what?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "To return willingly, or to let the world see what happens when I refuse." The weight of that pressed down on me until my chest hurt. "You won't go back," I said fiercely. "No," he agreed. "I won't." I reached for him without thinking, gripping his sleeve. "Then we fight." His gaze dropped to my hand, then back to my face. "No," he said gently. "We survive." That night he taught me how to disappear, how to listen without panicking, how to move without being seen, how to read the city like a living thing instead of a trap. He never raised his voice, never scared me on purpose, but every word carried urgency. "They are powerful, but they are predictable." "And you?" I asked. He met my eyes. "I am neither." As dawn broke, I realized something terrifying and undeniable. Kaelrin was no longer hiding from the world. He was preparing to face it. And whatever came next would change everything. The city stopped feeling like home the day I learned how to vanish inside it. Kaelrin didn't call it training. He didn't frame it like preparation for something dramatic or violent. He treated it like teaching someone how to breathe differently, like survival was a language I'd never been taught, and he was simply translating. "Don't fight the city," he told me as we walked through a crowded market one afternoon. "Blend with it." I kept my head down, heart racing, aware of every sound, every movement. My instincts screamed to hurry, but he slowed his pace deliberately. "Fear draws attention," he murmured. "Calm erases you." It felt impossible, but I tried. We changed routes daily, sometimes hourly. We learned which streets belonged to which kinds of people, which corners were watched, which alleys stayed forgotten. Kaelrin memorized everything. I watched him do it, his mind working like a map folding itself endlessly inward. And slowly, unbelievably, it worked. The Watchers missed us. Not because they weren't looking, but because Kaelrin knew how they thought, how power made people lazy, how control bred blind spots. "They expect chaos," he said one night, "so they don't see quiet." The days grew heavier anyway. Every time I laughed, guilt followed. Every time I felt safe, dread crept in behind it. I began to realize that survival came with its own cost. I was changing too. Not stronger, not dangerous, just steadier. Fear didn't paralyze me the way it used to. Hunger didn't feel like shame anymore. I stopped apologizing for existing. Somewhere between hiding and running, something inside me had hardened into resolve. Kaelrin noticed. "You're different," he said quietly as we shared a simple meal one evening. "So are you," I replied. He paused. Yes, there was something new in him as well, not just power, but restraint, purpose, like he was shaping himself deliberately now, no longer reacting, but choosing. That was when the dreams began. Not nightmares, memories. I would wake up with images burned into my mind, sterile white rooms, cold metal tables, voices calling orders in numbers instead of names, pain that wasn't mine but felt like it was. "I can feel them," I admitted one morning, my voice trembling. "Your past." Kaelrin didn't deny it. "Our bond is forming." The words settled heavily between us. "I didn't choose that," I said. "No," he agreed, "but you chose me." That was different. 3 months passed since the exchange yard. 3 months since 5 coins changed everything. That was when the city trembled. Not literally, socially. Rumors spread, whispers of something loose, something uncontrollable, groups dissolving, orders failing, assets vanishing, fear leaking upward instead of downward. "They're losing grip," I said one night. Kaelrin nodded, "because they built a weapon and forgot it had a will." Then came the message, not a letter, not a threat, an invitation. It arrived through channels I didn't know existed, passed hand to hand until it reached us without ever being written down. A meeting, neutral ground, no weapons. They want to see you," I said. "They want to measure me," Kaelrin corrected. My chest tightened. "It's a trap." "Yes." "And you'll go anyway?" "Yes." I grabbed his arm. "You don't have to." "I do," he said gently, "because if I don't, they escalate, and escalation costs lives." The idea of him walking into their reach made my hands shake. "What if you don't come back?" I asked. He looked at me for a long time, longer than he ever had before. "You continue," he said, without hiding. The night of the meeting, rain soaked the streets, blurring lights into streaks of color. We stood across from each other in silence, the air thick with things neither of us wanted to say out loud. "I'll be waiting," I said. "I know," he replied. He turned and disappeared into the rain. Every second after that felt stolen. I waited, I listened, I counted heartbeats. Hours passed. Then the city went quiet. Too quiet. When Kaelrin returned just before dawn, his clothes were untouched, his expression unreadable. I knew something irreversible had happened. "They won't hunt anymore," he said. Relief flooded me. "Because you scared them?" "No," he said, "because they finally understood." Understood what? That control only works on those who believe they are small. I stared at him, searching his face. "What did you promise them?" "Nothing," he replied. I reminded them. "Of what?" He met my eyes, golden gaze steady and calm, that I was never their creation. And in that moment, I realized the truth. Kaelrin hadn't just survived 3 months. He had become something the world was no longer ready to cage. The city didn't celebrate when the hunter stopped coming. There were no fireworks, no announcements, no sudden sense of victory. Power never leaves that way. It retreats quietly, licking its wounds, pretending it chose to step back. But I felt the change. It was in the way people walked again without looking over their shoulders, in the way the streets breathed easier at night, in the way Kaelrin stood a little less rigid, like he'd finally allowed himself to exist instead of preparing to disappear. For the first time since I'd bought him with 5 coins, we woke up without a plan. That terrified me more than any threat ever had. "What do we do now?" I asked one morning, watching dust drift through the thin sunlight. Kaelrin didn't answer right away. He stood near the window, hands clasped behind his back, eyes scanning the street out of habit more than necessity. "Now," he said slowly, "we decide who we are without them." That question followed me everywhere.
Without fear pushing me forward, I realized how much of my life had been shaped by running, hunger, shame, silence. I'd learned to survive by shrinking, and now there was no one forcing me small. It felt wrong, like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit yet. Kailerin struggled too, in ways he didn't speak about. He slept less again, not from fear, but from restlessness. Sometimes I'd find him awake before dawn, sitting perfectly still, eyes unfocused, like he was listening to echoes only he could hear. "They're gone," I reminded him gently once. "I know, but absence doesn't erase memory." I understood that better than I wanted to. One afternoon, as we walked through a part of the city I'd avoided for years, I noticed something strange. People weren't just stepping aside for Kailerin anymore. They were watching him, not with fear, with recognition. A man bowed his head slightly as we passed. A woman pressed her hand to her chest in a sign of respect. Whispers followed us, not sharp or cruel, but curious, hopeful. "What's happening?" I whispered. Kailerin's jaw tightened. "They feel it." "Feel what?" He glanced down at me. "Leadership." The word made my stomach flip. "We don't want that," I said quickly. "We just wanted to be safe." "Safety," he said quietly, "is never neutral." That was the day everything changed again. It started with a child. He couldn't have been more than 10, thin and wide-eyed, darting between people with practiced ease. He tripped near us, skidding across the pavement. Before I could react, Kailerin was there, steadying him with a gentle hand. "Easy," Kailerin said. The boy stared up at him like he'd just found something he'd been searching for. "They said you'd be here," the child blurted. My heart dropped. "Who said?" The boy looked at me. "The ones who hide." Kailerin stilled. "Tell them," the child continued, "that we're ready." "Ready for what?" The child vanished into the crowd before we could ask another question. We didn't speak until we were home. "You're being called," I said finally. Kailerin nodded. I was afraid of that. I wrapped my arms around me. "Called by who?" "By people like me," he replied, "and people like you." That night, they came. Not hunters, not officials, survivors. They arrived quietly, one by one, slipping into the building with careful steps and cautious eyes. Some bore scars like Kailerin's, others carried exhaustion so deep it had settled into their bones. Omegas, betas, even a few alphas who had learned the hard way what obedience really cost. They stood in my basement room, unsure, waiting. Kailerin looked at them, and for the first time he didn't try to make himself smaller. "You don't owe me loyalty," he said. "I won't command you, I won't own you." A murmur rippled through the room. "I will stand with you," he continued, "if you choose to stand with me." Silence followed. Then one person stepped forward, then another, then all of them. I watched something take shape in that room, not a pack, not an army, a promise. After they left, my legs finally gave out. I sank onto the mattress, overwhelmed. "This is bigger than us," I whispered. Kailerin knelt in front of me, meeting my eyes. It always was. Fear crept back in, quieter this time, more dangerous. "What if they come back?" I asked. "What if they crush this? Then we endure, together." I studied his face, searching for doubt. There was none, only resolve. That night, as I lay awake listening to the city breathe, I understood something that made my chest ache. 5 coins hadn't bought a miracle. They had started a movement, and once something like that begins, the world never goes back to the way it was before.
The morning arrived quiet, almost painfully so. No bells, no cries, no distant shouting of guards or hunters. only the hum of the city waking, soft and hesitant. Kael'ren and I moved through the streets carefully, aware that every pair of eyes now followed us, not with fear, but with curiosity. Word of his presence had spread overnight. People whispered in alleys and behind closed doors, their voices carrying a mix of hope and wonder. "They're watching," I murmured, keeping my hand on Kael'ren's arm. "They're choosing," he corrected, "and that is far more dangerous than fear." We reached the square where the child had appeared days before. The space was empty now, but we both felt it, the weight of expectation pressing on our shoulders. A shadow moved near the fountain. A woman stepped into the light, tall and strong, with a scar running down her forearm. She held herself with quiet authority, though her eyes betrayed exhaustion. Behind her, more people emerged, broken, wary, yet unbroken in spirit. Kael'ren's lips tightened. They have faith, not in me, in themselves. I swallowed hard. And you? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked forward, letting the group form a loose circle around him. "I will teach, I will guide, I will fight, but I will not demand loyalty where there is none. You are free to walk away at any moment." The murmurs grew louder, some nodding, others exchanging glances. Slowly, hesitantly, hands began to rise. Not all, but enough to create a Stark. A young man with eyes like polished steel stepped forward. "Then we follow you, not as masters or rulers, but as people who want to survive and to protect each other." Kael'ren studied him carefully, then nodded. "Then we begin." That day, we didn't fight, we didn't kill, we didn't command, we built. Barricades were reinforced, watchpoints established, and secret routes mapped through the city. Every action was deliberate, every decision weighed carefully. Kael'ren taught strategy, patience, and the importance of trust. I watched him, learning not just from what he said, but from what he didn't. By the evening, the square felt alive, not with noise or celebration, but with possibility. People were no longer hiding, they were thinking, planning, hoping. And then came the first warning. A scout, breathless and wide-eyed, arrived just as the sun dipped behind the towers. "They're coming back, more than before, organized, they know about us." I felt my stomach knot. Fear, sharp and immediate, clawed its way up. Kael'ren didn't flinch. "Then we will meet them, together." For the first time, I understood what it meant to face the storm willingly, not running, not hiding, not surviving by halves. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about standing, unbroken even when the world expected you to fall. And as the night closed around us, the city held its breath, waiting. The next battle wasn't coming for us alone. It was coming for everyone who had dared to hope. The night was heavy, suffocating, with a fog that seemed to crawl along the cobblestones of the outer sectors. Every shadow felt alive. Every whisper carried a threat. The city itself seemed to hold its breath, anticipating the clash to come. Kael'ren stood atop the barricade, his golden eyes scanning the horizon. The makeshift army of the Forgotten had gathered behind him, scarred, wary, but united. Men and women who had been crushed by life, beaten down by gangs, the city's elite, or their own fears, now armed with crowbars, chains, and stolen rifles. "They'll come in waves," Kael'ren said, his voice low but carrying over the restless crowd. "We cannot hope to match them in strength. We match them in cunning, in will, in the knowledge that we have nothing left to lose." Ivy stood beside him, clutching the black flag of House Blackwood. Her small hand brushed against his, and he gave the faintest squeeze, reassurance, a silent promise. A sudden scream ripped through the mist. A scout running from the south alley stumbled into the square. "They're here! Copperheads, Iron Guard, and others, too many to count." Calrin's eyes narrowed. Good. That means we are no longer ignored. The first wave struck. Shadows poured from the alleys, moving with lethal precision, shifters with teeth bared, armored guards with weapons gleaming in the dim light. Chaos erupted instantly. Calrin moved like a force of nature. His fist struck a man mid-charge, sending him crashing into the fountain. A swing of his leg knocked another off his feet. Even without fully shifting, his strength and reflexes were beyond human. Ivy's heart pounded, but she didn't flinch. She followed his commands, helping the wounded, passing weapons, biding the younger fighters. Her voice carried over the clash. "Hold the line! Don't give them the square!" A group of Iron Guard approached from the left, aiming rifles. Calrin's eyes glinted. He sprinted forward, dodging bullets with impossible speed, disarming one, smashing another into the ground, and using a third as a battering ram against the approaching squad. The tide began to turn, but Calrin knew this was only the first wave. Victor Kane would not send a small force. He would bring everything he had to crush the rebellion before it gained momentum. Then came the roar, a sound that made the ground tremble. Calrin shifted, part wolf, part man, a terrifying combination of muscle, claws, and fangs. His golden eyes blazed like molten fire. Every movement was calculated, every strike deadly. The Copperhead screamed as he tore through their ranks, his massive form unstoppable. Ivy, watching from the barricade, felt a surge of pride and fear. He was magnificent, terrifying, and completely hers. Her small voice echoed through the chaos. "Callan, don't let them take the square!" He looked up, catching her eyes, a subtle nod, and then he vanished into the mist, reappearing moments later with another wave of enemies already down, leaving devastation in his wake. The battle raged until the blood moon reached its zenith. By the end, the streets of Sector 4 were littered with broken weapons, overturned carts, and groaning, wounded soldiers. The people of the square were exhausted, covered in mud, grime, and blood, but they were alive. Calrin stood in the center, his chest heaving, golden eyes scanning his followers. This is only the beginning. Victor will retaliate and he will not hesitate. But tonight we survived, and tonight we made a statement. Ivy stepped forward, raising the tethered flag. "We are not forgotten," she shouted, her voice carrying across the emptied streets. "We are not weak. We are not prey." For the first time in months, hope spread through the hearts of the abandoned. They had a leader, they had a protector, and they had each other. But high above, in the gleaming heights of Sector 1, Victor Kane's cold eyes narrowed as he watched the reports flood in. The golden eyes of Blackwood had returned, and they were no longer shackled. "Send everything," Victor hissed. "Kill them all. Leave nothing for the wolf to reclaim." The blood moon cast its red light across the city. Shadows shifted. The game had changed, and the true war was only beginning. The city slept uneasily under the blood moon, unaware that the war had already begun. Sector 4 bore the scars of the previous night, smoldering barricades, overturned carts, and the groans of the wounded echoing through the foggy streets. But even as the people tried to recover, a new terror was coming. Victor Kane did not forgive failure. He did not negotiate. He sent an army, a calculated storm of steel, fire, and merciless precision. Calrin stood atop the highest rubble in the square, surveying the horizon. The copper-red dawn was just beginning to pierce the mist, revealing armored trucks, drone squads, and soldiers moving in perfect formation from all sides. "They're here," Ivy whispered, gripping his arm.
Her voice trembled, though her resolve burned as fiercely as the black flag in her hands. All of them. Caileron's jaw tightened. His wolf instincts flared, sensing every movement, every heartbeat, every shadow. "We hold the square," he said quietly, his voice a growl that carried through the ranks. "We die if we must, but we do not surrender." The first assault was brutal. Cannons roared, drones swarmed, and elite Copperhead squads, trained killers, stormed through the fog. But Caileron was ready. He shifted, his form a blur of sinew and fury, and tore through the advancing enemies with terrifying precision. Every strike was deliberate, every leap calculated, and the ground shook with his power. Ivy coordinated the civilians and fighters, using the terrain, makeshift traps, and the chaos to their advantage. A fallen cart became a barricade, flaming barrels sent armored squads scattering, and hidden trenches disrupted the enemy's momentum. Despite their ingenuity, the army of Victor Kane was relentless. Reinforcements arrived faster than anticipated, and the drones provided real-time tactical data, predicting movements, cutting off escape routes. Caileron growled, sensing the shift. He leapt atop a truck, his golden eyes scanning for Victor's hand in the attack. And there he was, Kane himself, standing atop a mobile command post, exuding cold authority, watching the chaos unfold like a predator observing prey. "Caileron Blackwood," Kane's voice boomed through a megaphone, distorted but unmistakable. "You defy me, and now your city bleeds for it. Surrender, and perhaps I'll spare what remains of your people." Caileron bared his fangs. "Never. Not today, not ever." The battle escalated. Drones fired, soldiers charged, and Caileron moved like a phantom, tearing through the enemy with inhuman strength. Yet with every victory, the city itself paid the price. Fire consumed buildings, walls crumbled, and cries of pain echoed through the streets. Ivy's heart pounded as she saw children, the elderly, and fighters injured in the crossfire. Her voice rang out, commanding, rallying, pleading, urging people to survive. She ran through the square, directing the wounded to safety, throwing herself between the innocent and the advancing soldiers. At the height of the chaos, Caileron sensed a shift. Victor Kane had deployed his secret weapon, a towering mech, gleaming black, with reinforced armor and weapons that could level entire streets, advanced toward the center of the square. Caileron roared, shifting fully into his wolfman form, golden eyes blazing. "I will stop him," he growled, "whatever it takes." The ground trembled as the first clash between Caileron and the mech began. Sparks flew, concrete shattered, and the air filled with the deafening sound of metal against muscle. The city's fate hung by a thread, and Caileron's strength was pushed to its absolute limits. Ivy watched, helpless yet defiant, knowing that if Caileron fell, the last ember of hope for their people would die. But she also knew this: he would never fall willingly, not while there was breath in his lungs and fire in his heart. As the sun rose higher, blood, smoke, and fire painted the city red. The war had escalated beyond survival. It was now a battle for the very soul of the city. And somewhere deep in the chaos, Caileron's roar echoed, a promise, a warning, and a vow. The wolf would fight, the Blackwood would rise, and Victor Kane would learn that some fires could not be extinguished.